proceedings. This is usually followed by questions and answers to questions, statements by ministers, items under public business, and private members' motions. Before we begin, though, let's try a parliamentary trivia question. The procedure for money bills differs from that of ordinary bills. Is this true or false? Get the answer at the end of this introduction to the lower house. On the agenda for this sitting under public business, the sectoral debate continues with Member of Parliament for St. Andrew Western, Mr. George Anthony Hylton. Every year, following the budget debate, the House of Representatives, the lower house, engages in another round of presentations known as the sectoral debates. Based on the standing orders, rules governing the Houses of Parliament, members are entitled to speak during these debates, and those members are any minister and any member of the opposition selected by the leader of the opposition. That's what's on the agenda. It should be noted that elements of the day's agenda can be changed or moved. But before we go, here are a few things you should bear in mind if you plan to attend a session at Gordon House. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed, unless so authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. It's almost time to go to the main event, but before that, let's get the answer to the trivia question. We asked, is it true or false that the procedure for money bills differ from that of ordinary bills? It's true. Money bills, which may be initiated only in the House of Representatives, deal with any aspect of the government's finance, such as taxation, loans, and audit of accounts. Here's what usually happens. Government ministers put forward resolutions stating that money will be spent and how. These estimates are debated by the House in committee. When the various resolutions have been agreed to, they are incorporated into bills, which are passed in the usual way. Here are a few more interesting facts about the Houses of Parliament. The office of the Leader of the Opposition is established in the Constitution. Jamaica led the Commonwealth of Nations in the enshrinement of this office in the Constitution. The Leader of the Opposition must be consulted on a number of important matters, such as the appointments of the Chief Justice, the President of the Court of Appeal, and the members of the Services Commissions. The opposition leader nominates 8 of the 21 senators, and since the votes of 2/3 of all members of the Senate are required for parliamentary amendment of the most significant constitutional provisions, then at least one senator nominated by the leader of the opposition must support any constitutional amendment in order for it to gain parliamentary approval. The proceedings will begin in a few moments. No, sir.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malaufort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hylton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Dr. Charles, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Lawrence.
Members, just before we start the business of the day, I would like to bring to your attention that one of our members, the member from Manchester Central, lost a dear grandmother since we last met in this house. And therefore, I would like to extend to her and her family, our heartfelt sympathies. Our grandmother is a really special person, as my own children would tell you. I too would like to acknowledge all the very kind sentiments through calls and written expressions on the loss of my own mother since we last met. She passed very peacefully with all her children, grandchildren, and nieces by her bed. We were all around her. She was indeed a very precious person to us. And she taught us many life lessons. And I think the last one she taught us was on Friday the 27th. And I think that it was that we all need to learn to accept and exit gracefully when the race is over. Her race was over, and I can only commend to my friend from Central Manchester the words that comfort us now from Job chapter 8, verse 21, which says, "He will once again fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy." I thank you all very much. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, the statement today I wanted to focus on the very moment of deep reflection on your part, Madam Speaker. And I was hoping, in fact, that we could have used the moment to not just reflect with you on the life and worth and work of your great mother, Mrs. Gloria Vieira, who passed on the 27th, Friday the 27th, but also to give you the sense of comfort from this chamber as our leader of this great parliament, and to offer you the level of comfort in the certain knowledge that your mother was such an outstanding person who contributed so much to the development of Trelawney, her parish of great love, and the issues from her own humanness that is reflected in your own person and your persona, and how you have comported yourself and managed your process and contributed to your sisters, and particularly Valerie, who we well know, and the outstanding work that she's doing in building small and medium enterprises, business enterprises across the island, and in craft and in development, the creative spirit of our people. But her siblings overall, and indeed the family, and how powerful a family they have been in Trelawney. The numerous charitable organizations that she's well known and connected with in Trelawney, her philanthropy, her generosity of spirit. Indeed, as a mother and a matriarch of the family, she's contributed and done so much in building and molding the character and the lives of her children who have done so well in Jamaica and the wider community. So we wanted all in this chamber to commiserate with you. But we also wanted to encourage in your process of grieving, to not grieve without hope, to not grieve as those who have no hope, but to grieve with a certain knowledge that you will see her again, because her life on earth has been one that will shine for her in another place. And our Judeo-Christian tradition makes us feel comforted by life afterwards, because that's what's the essence of our faith, that we will see her again. In the process, I'd like also to offer a similar word of comfort to our sister Rhoda Moy Crawford, who lost her grandmother. And I know how powerful and wonderful grandmothers are. And I know that Grandma played a key role in your development and your life. And she really had the great honor of seeing you come to this parliament and represent the people of Central Manchester. And I think that was of great truth. So I would like to ask that the clerk of this house would pen in her usual way the kind sentiments of this house in relation to the passing of these two wonderful ladies to their respective families. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
But, Madam Speaker, you would have expected me to do no less. I want to join in the words of the House leader of government business, in paying condolences to you, Madam Speaker, on the loss of your mother. I didn't know your mother, but I knew, and I've had the privilege to work now with Valerie as minister in this industry ministry, and you as speaker in this house. And if these are two shining examples, then your mother certainly would have done her part in nation building. And so, Madam Speaker, I just want to say to you a word of encouragement, and to say these are the moments when your faith is what you have to lean on. And I know you're a woman of faith, great faith, and I pray that these next couple of weeks and months, you'll be comforted in cushioning the loss. It's not easy, even when you're prepared for it. It never is. And so, Madam Speaker, we wish you well and God's blessings. I'd like to join as well in giving my condolences on behalf of myself and the members on this side to member from East Central Manchester. And to say that a grandmother's loss is no less than a mother's loss. Indeed, in many instances, it is stronger because grandmothers in our tradition have been the bedrock of our families. So we pay our condolences and to wish you well and to say, hang tough. Our prayers are with you. Madam Speaker, with these words, I ask as the House Leader has done, that the appropriate thing be done, the usual thing be done in sending our condolences and our tributes. Thank you.
Just to indicate that today's business will primarily center around the presentation of the member from Western St. Andrew. And I'd just like to indicate that the debate will in fact close on the 8th of June, and that the members who have not yet spoken but are rostered to speak will all be accommodated the sitting tomorrow, the sitting next Tuesday and Wednesday. And I will close definitely on June 8th. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. And even as we start, I want to, as usual, welcome everyone to the continuation of the sectoral debate this afternoon, where the leader of business for the opposition, member Mr. Anthony Hylton, will make his presentation. I want to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us online via YouTube, on PBC TV, and those who are in the gallery with us this afternoon to support him. And I know, I am assured, we will have an interesting presentation. Statements by ministers, announcements, bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to sittings of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business.
Madam Speaker, as indicated earlier, the item on public business is the continuation, and I beg to move that the sectoral debate, which was adjourned last sitting of the House, be continued today, and the Speaker will be the Member of Parliament for St. Andrew Weston, Mr. George Hylton.
I now invite the member, MP from St. Andrew Weston, to speak.
Madam Speaker, I start by recognizing that this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I'm privileged, Madam Speaker, to be addressing this Honourable House on a portfolio subject for the 25th time. Each time for me, Madam Speaker, feels like the first, because the standard of preparation remains high. I must begin, Madam Speaker, by recognizing you for your professionalism, independence, and balance in your stewardship in the affairs of this Honourable House. This has not always sat well, from my observation, with those seeking partiality, nor does it sit well at times with those seeking leniency when you have had to be firm but fair. Madam Speaker, we have to give recognition to those who send us here to protect their interests and those who support we continue to rely on in the performance of our duties. First, Madam Speaker, I must recognize and bless up my constituents of Western St. Andrew for their continuing faith in me to represent their aspirations. They know, Madam Speaker, that this is not an easy road. Next, Madam Speaker, I must recognize the workers in the political vineyard for their hard and tireless work in helping to build and to maintain a political organization. Here, Madam Speaker, I must mention my councillors, Mrs. Hazel Anderson, Byron Clark, Norman Perry, and caretaker Michelle Thomas. Also, Madam Speaker, I mention my cluster managers, two of whom are here, and I'm assured the others, well, I see three, and I'm assured some others are on their way. I want to acknowledge as well, Madam Speaker, the office staff who are here. I want to recognize in particular Ms. Jennifer Edwards, and I want to recognize your assistant, Cassie. Miss Edwards do properly belong in the well of this house. I don't know why she's up there. I'd like to recognize as well our faithful assistant, Cassie, hardworking. The constituency secretary, Ms. Grace Barrett, and my CDF officer, who I gather even now is making sure that the printed copies are here on time. Okay. I'd also like to recognize my close protection officer and my driver, Mr. James and Mr. Malcolm. Madam Speaker, I pay special recognition to our party leader, the leader of opposition, Mr. Mark Golding. I want to thank him for his leadership, and he's growing in that leadership. I'm very pleased to say that my trust and my faith remain very firm in his leadership. I want to thank him for his foresight, and I'll say a bit more about that, Madam Speaker, in my presentation. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues on both sides of the House, who, apart from the occasional bantering, I think there has become, and there is, I believe, a camaraderie that is recognizable as we go about the business of this House. And so I want to commend. And at this moment, Madam Speaker, I want to pay a special shout out and welcome to the Minister of National Security, who has not been with us for a little while. And I know he was not well, and I want to welcome him back to the show. Looking well rested. Last but not least, Madam Speaker, I want to recognize my family, my wife and my daughter, Yodit and Nile. Neither of them were able to be here today because Nile was still in school, and wherever she is, the mother is not very far off. So I want to recognize them for their support and for really bearing the brunt of what we do as politicians. Because, Madam Speaker, we can't praise them too much because we have made our choices. In many instances, they have been reluctant partners. And yet they bear the brunt of some of the difficult decisions that we have to make from time to time. So again, I give a shout out to them and thank you. Madam Speaker, I begin my presentation by recognizing that experience teaches wisdom. We have all been witness to a 1 in a 100-year pandemic caused by the coronavirus, COVID-19, which has impacted the world with millions of lives lost, livelihoods affected, jobs lost, and the upending of the global supply chain. For the better part of a year and a half, Madam Speaker, since March 2020, the world economy and society have been in turmoil from the measures imposed by governments in an effort to come to grips with the pandemic and its effect on businesses and on people. Today, Madam Speaker, we are much clearer that though imperceptible, the global supply chain is real. For decades, a system of sourcing of materials, production of goods and services, warehousing and distribution operated without much concern, except for the occasional disruption caused by natural disasters like Hurricane Gilbert, or some geopolitical upheaval like the Cuban blockade and what we are witnessing now, Madam Speaker, the Russian blockade of Ukraine harbor. Or, Madam Speaker, it might be trade disputes for which there are temporary unavailability of goods and services, but nothing on the scale of COVID-19. COVID-19 has induced disruption, as we have all experienced. And, Madam Speaker, there is no blueprint for a response. Madam Speaker, due to human ingenuity in science, vaccines were engineered which proved efficient and effective in quelling the first wave of the virus, but certainly not its disappearance. Certain of the measures taken by governments, Madam Speaker, to address the spread of the virus are still with us, even as other measures are being revived. Madam Speaker, just as the economic recovery was underway here in Jamaica and globally, the Russia-Ukraine war introduced further complexities in the stability and sustainability of the world economic growth amidst a humanitarian crisis, Madam Speaker, where some 3 million Ukrainians are either scattered in nearby countries, bordering countries, and even more are refugees in their own country. The resilience of the global supply chain system continues to be tested. But what have we learned, Madam Speaker? The lens through which I speak to this question is that of the opposition spokesman on industry, investment, and global logistics. The opposition's viewpoint, Madam Speaker, is very much influenced by its understanding that global supply and value chains are central to the efficient and productive operation of the world economy, and indeed our own economy. And further, that our businesses can gain a competitive advantage through their investment in and implementation of modern systems and methods of supply chain management. Equally, Madam Speaker, the opposition is very clear that a sustained economic recovery must rest on the building of an agile, resilient, and sustainable supply chain, both globally and locally. Hence, Madam Speaker, its naming of a portfolio that continues to give focused attention on global logistics and the supply chain after the 2020 elections. Indeed, Madam Speaker, the opposition, in giving the government its advice in dealing with the pandemic, identified the logistics and supply chain issues as key to the successful administration of the vaccine program to a population in which the level of vaccine hesitancy was already very high. Yet, Madam Speaker, it is clear that among the problems encountered in the rollout and administration of the vaccine program were the unavailability of vaccines, the logistics surrounding their transportation, and the storage and timely administration of the amounts of vaccines with which we were eventually gifted or acquired. As a result, a significant amount of vaccine was eventually dumped. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the scenes of chaos at several of the vaccine sites bear testimony to the absence of proper logistics planning, which itself contributed to the low level of vaccination currently among the population. Madam Speaker, the just concluded budget debate revealed a strategy by the administration which leaves much doubt as to whether the main challenges to sustain economic growth in this period of volatility, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity is fully grasped by the government. The opposition, in its contributions to the budget debate, argued for flexibility in the approach to the allocation of the available financial resources. Specifically, we argued that in light of the elevated prices of basic goods and services due to the supply chain disruptions and the resulting increase in inflation globally, that some $40 billion be reallocated from the budgeted sums to cushion the effects of the shocks on the most vulnerable in the society. And that includes, Madam Speaker, the MSME businesses. Madam Speaker, the government has so far remained fixed to economic orthodoxy at a time when it is clear that counter-cyclical measures are needed to respond to a once-in-a-lifetime event brought on by the pandemic and its consequences for the most vulnerable in the society. Perhaps the most controversial of these actions, Madam Speaker, is the decision of the Bank of Jamaica to increase its policy interest rate ahead of or in tandem with other central banks globally in what it articulates as its strategy for tamping down imported inflation. Madam Speaker, the opposition and other key stakeholders in the private sector have expressed the view that this orthodox method of fighting supply chain-induced inflation is not likely to achieve its intended result in the short to medium term, but will in fact increase pressure on the vulnerable businesses and individuals. The government, Madam Speaker, nevertheless persists in this questionable policy strategy for fighting supply chain-driven inflation while seeking to grow the economy. Madam Speaker, the concerns of the opposition are further heightened by the recent presentation of my friend, the Minister of State in the Portfolio Ministry, to this Honourable House. Listening to the Minister's presentation, Madam Speaker, one would have thought that the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, as well as climate change, are not real, but a mere hoax. Nowhere in the Minister's presentation was there even a hint of any of the headwinds now buffeting the sectors for which he has joint responsibility. Instead, Madam Speaker, we were treated to a catalogue of carefully selected highlights of the successes of the Portfolio Ministry and its several agencies. Many of the achievements are commendable. And without being invidious, Madam Speaker, I would like, and I do single out for commendation, the sustained effort in finally implementing the Madrid Protocol. Madam Speaker, this has been a long journey. It has been at least a 30-year trek. And many of us on this side, have done some heavy lifting in the process, but the ministry is to be commended. This has been, and Madam Speaker, I dare say that I'm confident that the benefits of the protocol make and will make the effort well worth it. The Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, Madam Speaker, in particular, must be singled out for special mention. But I digress. Madam Speaker, although the portfolio includes commerce in the assignment, nowhere was there any discussion of the strained supply chains or even an indication that any specific solution or set of solutions to the elevated prices of consumer goods and services was being considered by the Business Ministry, except, of course, the mentioned successful action by the Consumer Affairs Commission in bringing to book some errant businesses for violation of the consumer protection laws. Commendable as that is, Madam Speaker, the challenges before us, before the ministry and Jamaica, goes far, far deeper. We therefore are left to await the presentation of the senior portfolio minister in the Senate, sometimes in the future, to learn of the current thinking of the administration on the problems at the heart of the price rises for several key commodities and produce goods for inputs into production of consumer items such as food, oil and gas, houses and transportation as a result of the disruption in the supply chains. Madam Speaker, the only indication by the government that it appreciates the ripple effect of the supply chain disruption across industries and portfolios is the proposal of the Minister of Tourism in his opening presentation in this section of the debate. Recall, Madam Speaker, that the Minister called for the establishment of a committee to be headed by Mr. Wilfred Bagaloo of PricewaterhouseCoopers to set up in Jamaica a logistics center to ensure the availability of supplies of goods and services for the critical tourism sector in the drive for economic recovery. The suggestion, Madam Speaker, clearly recognizes the nature of the challenges facing the recovery of the sector and the wider economy in the aftermath of the pandemic and seeks to do something about it. The opposition is equally clear that an effective response will not and cannot come from increased interest rates on the mounting debts already owed by the small and medium-sized hotels and linked businesses already heavily impacted by the long shutdown of the sector. A solution is clearly needed for these small and medium-sized hotels. I repeat, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, a solution is clearly needed for the small and medium-sized hotels, and it's urgent. Madam Speaker, even as the opposition welcomes the acknowledgement by the Minister of the source of a key challenge to building back better, i.e., the building of a resilient supply chain, and even though the opposition agrees that the path to immediate economic recovery lies a great deal in the recovery of the tourism sector, other sectors, such as the manufacturing, the creative and circular economies, have key roles to play in a sustained recovery of the Jamaican economy. Among the lessons learned from the pandemic, Madam Speaker, is the risk we face when there is an over-reliance on any one sector. The economy cannot be driven on one engine. It has to be multiple engines. Considering, however, the quick wins that are possible from the tourism sector as the economy struggles to recover in a turbulent environment, the opposition suggests that it be invited to contribute to the shaping of the terms of reference of the proposed committee and to play an integral role in what, Madam Speaker, must be an exercise of all hands on deck in this critical period, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the muted and unbalanced response by our government in addressing the ongoing supply chain challenges stands in stark contrast to other countries globally and in our region. Madam Speaker, President Biden identified as a key priority action the building of a more agile and resilient supply chain domestically and globally as a key part of his first 100-day action plan after his election to office in 2020. Since then, he has appointed an ambassador to lead the effort to solve the congestion at the ports throughout the United States and has elevated the supply chain challenges as a strategic element in U.S. domestic economic and security policy. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to point members and listeners to this, a published document published on June 21st by a U.S. publication titled Building Resilient Supply Chains, Revitalizing American Manufacturing and Fostering Broad-Based Growth. I commend that document, Madam Speaker. It makes for excellent reading. As such, high-level meetings with bilateral and regional partners have prominently featured discussions on global supply chain solutions with partners in the Asia-Pacific region and elsewhere. Similarly, a US $1.2 billion, not billion, trillion dollar infrastructure act aimed at rebuilding America's physical and digital supply chain infrastructure has been signed into law by President Biden. But lest we believe this is just about America and America's response, hear this. Other governments have established task forces to produce policy strategy and action plans to address this critical challenge to the economy and business growth. New Zealand, a country of roughly our size population, has also produced a policy guide to national discussions termed New Zealand's Freight and Supply Chain Issues Paper. Madam Speaker, from within our own CARICOM region comes news that Barbados and Guyana are planning to build a food terminal to facilitate the movement of agricultural products within the region. This development, Madam Speaker, is in furtherance of a recent decision by CARICOM to develop action plans to reduce the region's food import bill of some US $6 billion annually by reducing it to 25% by 2025. The announcements of plans to build a food terminal was made by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who reportedly said, and I quote, "We have got to perfect Guyana Wolipa land and investment. We have got to perfect the logistics, and we believe that the investment in Guyana and Barbados food terminals will be critical. We have the plans and the numbers. We are working on it even now." Madam Speaker, these governments clearly recognize that the fundamental need in the freight and supply chain markets cannot be accomplished by the market on its own. Coordinated government action is needed. The opposition again calls for the establishment, as it did last year and the time before that, the establishment of a supply chain and logistics council. You, party leader of opposition, call for the establishment of such a council. The council would bring together, Madam Speaker, key institutions in both the public and private sectors to share critical high-level data, and this notwithstanding the commercial sensitivity, by breaking down tribal knowledge stored in silos in companies and agencies. The value add of this proposed council, Madam Speaker, is to assist in guiding policy strategy and action plans beneficial to building capacity in this critical supply chain and logistics sector. Madam Speaker, the opposition has not been shy in putting forward its recommendations. Regarding the disrupted supply chain, the following solutions are being put forward. We must review and redesign the supply chains, and this must be considered by our firms and businesses to ensure resilience and sustainability of their organizations and their operational supply chain. Madam Speaker, other countries in Europe and elsewhere, Germany in particular, are contemplating specific laws, specific legislation, requiring and placing an obligation on businesses in the supply chain to
Madam Speaker, the member's time having expired, I beg to move that the member be allowed enough time to wrap up and complete his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, a question before the House is that the member be given sufficient time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
I thank my colleagues for their graciousness, including the Minister of Local Government. Madam Speaker, I was making the point that in Germany, there is specific legislation requiring and obligating firms that are involved in the supply chain sector to do their due diligence on second and third tier and fourth tier companies. The reason being, Madam Speaker, is that the problem is not with those with whom they contract. The problem very often is with those companies that are suppliers of those with whom they contract, and that there's a certain lack of transparency in their operation. And as we often said, and we recognize, a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Right. And so the idea is to place an obligation for there to be due diligence beyond the contracted companies and down into the supply chain. Madam Speaker, we are not there yet, and if we ever get there, but it's a word to our companies that they have to pay attention to their suppliers, those who supply them in the chain. Also, Madam Speaker, the just-in-time strategy currently used by businesses to optimize costs must be reformed to a just-in-case strategy that shifts focus from cost minimization to value creation, thus capturing the complexity, the volatility, and uncertainty of the competitive environment in which modern supply chains operate. Equally important, Madam Speaker, is the need for end-to-end visibility in the supply chain. This, Madam Speaker, is achievable with existing technology, with data, processes, and communications to create a dynamic supply chain solution. This, Madam Speaker, when combined with data analytics and investment in appropriate technology, creates the ability to plan and to make decisions in real time in a fast-paced economy. Importantly, Madam Speaker, this recommendation, the opposition recommend that attention be paid to climate change, and that a requirement for these companies in modernizing themselves is to build climate resilience. This must be a feature of any modern supply chain. In order to survive the extreme weather events associated with climate change, decarbonization of the entire supply chain, Madam Speaker, requires more than a statement of intent by businesses and governments, but it must be a call to action by both. Madam Speaker, I turn next to the special economic zones, which we, Madam Speaker, views as an opportunity for investment, jobs, and economic growth. Madam Speaker, the special economic zone was conceived as a key part of the Global Logistic Hub Initiative and Master Plan, articulated by the opposition in government and designed to give legislative and regulatory support to create the ecosystem necessary to attract investments in a range of commercial, industrial, and services businesses permitted in the SEZs. Madam Speaker, to date there are over 160 SEZs, mostly of the single entity type, engaged in a variety of business activities, mainly in the BPO, the business process outsourcing sector, which accounts for thousands of jobs, some with career appointments. The BPO sector, Madam Speaker, contributes its contribution to the economic growth during the pandemic was and remain significant. But Madam Speaker, 2 multi-user SEZs have been announced by the government as being pre-approved by the Jamaica Special Economic Zone, JSEZA, as planned SEZs, namely the Seaview Eco-Industrial and Logistic Park and the Cayman Special Economic Zone. These to be located respectively in the Seaview Gardens, Riverton area of my constituency, and in East Central St. Catherine, respectively. Madam Speaker, the World Free Zone Conference 2022, to be held in Montego Bay from June 13th to 17th, is testimony to the appeal Jamaica continues to have with the rest of the world as a potential major player in global logistics. This is especially so after the pandemic, Madam Speaker, because there has been a noticeable shift occurring in the global trade and the supply and value chains. The major trend is towards SEZs or trade zones located in countries or regions that offer political stability and access to major consumer markets. This development, Madam Speaker, is being referred to as nearshoring or friend shoring. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the conference will be taking place with issues relating to the optimal operation of the SEZs still unresolved or in urgent need of reform. Among the issues are: 1, market access for goods and services produced in the SEZs with CARICOM member countries. 2, the availability of competitively priced energy in industrial zones. And this, Madam Speaker, is a major, major issue that needs to be resolved. And I say no more about that now because there's a committee looking very closely at the matter, and being a member of the committee, I will speak my truth there first and to see how the committee responds. But the matter is serious. 3rd, Madam Speaker, is a significant lag time in the development of the Cayman Special Economic Zone announced in 2014 under the previous administration, and the uncertainty surrounding the development of Vernon Field Aerotropolis, pursued in several different forms and names by successive administrations. 4th, Madam Speaker, is the need for an updated CARICOM trade policy and strategy. This, Madam Speaker, is impatient. CARICOM trade policy need even to recognize the importance of services as a critical part of trade that it now currently does in any significant way. And I'm speaking about its agreements with third countries. The need for an updated industrial policy and strategy must be recognized as well, Madam Speaker. And 4thly, and very importantly, the appropriately skilled professionals in the range of logistics and supply chain activities contemplated in an industrial or supply SEZs. Madam Speaker, the jobs that are possible are jobs that are not even, some of them are not even created yet. And the Minister of Education and Training, Madam Minister, there's a whole new horizon out there, and particularly around technology, that the ministry and its agencies, and including particularly the Heart Trust, must get on board with this agenda. And I know it's not your agency, but it is closely related. No, it's closely related. And so, Madam Speaker, I urge that the skills training be given focused attention in this period. Notwithstanding these issues, Madam Speaker, the conference is supported by the opposition as an important first step in publicizing Jamaica's significant opportunity and interests in becoming the fourth node in the global trading system. And that is an ambition articulated many, many years ago. The opportunity still exists, though the window is closing and closing fast. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, opposition has demonstrated its awareness of the gaps in Jamaica's supply chain capabilities and the risks associated with these gaps. Specifically, the opposition has been consistent in demonstrating insight and courage in commissioning the World Bank-financed Global Logistic Hub Initiative and Master Plan, and consistency in calling for its implementation. Madam Speaker, I dare say that had this been responded to in a timely manner, Jamaica would today be way ahead of its competitors regionally and positioned to compete extra-regionally. But instead, Madam Speaker, we're still at first base, trying to get off first base and to round the corner. Madam Speaker, we're then forced to ask, is this a case of Nero fiddling while Rome burns? I repeat, is this a case of Nero fiddling while Rome burns? Still, Madam Speaker, it's better late than never that the government has finally announced an intention to develop the Cayman Special Economic Zone, which has been in gestation for over 10 years. In this period, that's a lifetime. The opposition, Madam Speaker, calls for a similar resolve by the government to advance plans to build the Vernon Field Aerotropolis, announced even earlier than the Global Logistic Hub Initiative, under successive administrations. One stumbling block in the way of the Vernon Field project, Madam Speaker, and in its implementation, is the existence of an exclusivity clause in the divestment agreement of the Norman Manley International Airport. And this clause, Madam Speaker, restricts development of Vernon Field to a cargo-only airport into the foreseeable future. Madam Speaker, since the bulk of air freight transported globally is carried in the belly or in the hold of passenger aircraft for cost efficiency reasons, the restrictive clause should be amended to allow for long-haul passenger carriers to fly direct from regions like Asia Pacific or the Middle East and Africa with both passenger and cargo. The Minister of Tourism agrees with this, as you should, because it makes sense for tourism. Madam Speaker, this would diversify and extend Jamaica's global footprint and positively impact our trading opportunities in tourism, export manufacturing, and agricultural trade with the fast-growing regions of the world. Such a move, Madam Speaker, would make more resilient Jamaica's global supply chains and enhance our prospects for recovery, sustained growth, and development of our economy and people. Madam Speaker, in closing, I offer these recommendations in an effort to realize and to make real the Jamaican dream for all the people. May God continue to bless Jamaica, land we love.
Madam Speaker, I think we would like to thank the member and in fact to commend him on a very well-researched and eloquently presented statement to this Honourable House today in this debate. Madam Speaker, the debate has been going extremely well, and I think that as you know, members have made recommendations on all sides, and I'll no doubt be making reference to that in my closing on Wednesday next. But, Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business, but just before we do, I beg to move that the sectoral debate be suspended until tomorrow, Wednesday, the 1st of June, at 2 p.m. in the George William Gordon House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that the sectoral debate be suspended until tomorrow, Wednesday, the 1st of June at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, just by way of a reminder before the motion of adjournment, that the speakers tomorrow, and it's urgent that members recall that we start at 2 p.m. and I think we've been doing extremely well in starting at 2 p.m. Madam Speaker, you have led the way in this, because even this afternoon, I had to rush from my chambers to come in order to catch you halfway in the Honourable House. So you are leading the way extremely well in this regard. So the speakers tomorrow will be the Minister of National Security, Dr. the Honourable Horace Chang, and Deputy Prime Minister, as well as the spokesman on education, Opposition spokesman on education, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, and Ms. Denise Daly, the Member of Parliament for a section of St. Catherine. So, Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. I invite you to adjourn the House until tomorrow, Wednesday, June 1, at 2 p.m.
Members, the question before the House is that the House do adjourn until tomorrow, 1st of June, at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House is now adjourned.